Welcome to Business Legal Lifecycle TV, the live TV show all about the legal aspects of your business. We've designed this TV show to educate you in simple to understand plain English ways for complex legal terms, to help you understand why you undertake certain legal aspects of your business, and to help you develop a plan for the future success of your business. Did you know that any business owner is on average 7 months away from losing everything? And that is the average time that it takes for a successful business to fold when an aspect of their business is not set up correctly. Have you ever wanted to get legal advice but didn't understand what was going on? And do you feel like there's a divide between lawyers and their clients? If that's so, then this TV show is for you. We've designed the show to empower you and your business with the knowledge and tools to help ensure that those problems that so many businesses encounter don't happen to you. Business Legal Lifecycle TV delivers a twice-weekly show focusing on the legal aspects of your business. At lunchtime on Mondays, we present Fast Fix Monday, a quick 5 to 10 minute show to give you some actionable steps to consider for this week in your business. And at lunchtime on Wednesdays, we present our in-depth show. It's generally between 30 minutes to an hour to go through the complicated legal aspects of your business in a simple to understand and plain English way. That can be through educational pieces or interviews with experts in the fields. We welcome you to Business Legal Lifecycle TV, and here's our show.
Hi everyone, and welcome to Business Legal Lifecycle TV, or if you're listening to us on the podcast, thank you for joining us. My name is Jeremy Stratton. I am one of the founders of the Business Legal Lifecycle, and this is the show for people in business who want to know what they're finding out about their business from a legal point of view. So today we've got a show about buying businesses and mergers and acquisitions. So I'm going to go through that in a bit of detail. But just to start off with, here's a copy of the Business Legal Lifecycle. Essentially, there are 13 phases that go through what you need to do from a legal aspect in your business and when you should do it. So if you're interested in more, you'll see the rolling scrolling down the bottom says that you need, or you can contact our website. Or you can email us at lifecycle@jeremystratton.com for anyone who's listening to us on the podcast. So today we're going to go through what are mergers and acquisitions, and we're going to basically go through some information that is useful for you to know in your business from a legal point of view when you're actually buying a business. So what are we actually talking about here? Here we're talking about when you actually use the purchase of a business to actually expand. So it's actually quite a common thing that people actually do in their businesses. It's a common practice that people use to actually expand, and it can actually be used quite effectively for business owners who are looking to do that. So let's start off with what are mergers and acquisitions. So mergers and acquisitions, essentially, they're two different things, but it's a terminology that is used quite interchangeably in a lot of businesses. A merger is when you have two companies that are usually unrelated and they come together to become one entity. Whereas an acquisition is usually when one company will buy another company's business. So I'll go through in a bit more detail about what that looks like. But both of these are strategies that are used quite successfully and quite commonly by businesses to expand and to go into other areas. So if you think about it, if you've got two companies that are on equal footing and they are expanding together, merging together, then they can become a bigger and better company than what they are now. You might merge, if you've got one company that's in one part of the supply chain, you might merge with another one, and basically the owners become equal owners in that business. It can actually be a really great way to establish and to maintain loyalty and trust. Acquisition is essentially when someone buys a business from someone else, as I said before. And so this can be used where a business is expanding and looking at buying other parts or other businesses or other even competitors. So you can have your vertical purchases, and you can also have horizontal purchases where you might buy someone in the supply chain, or you might buy someone, or a competitor in the business. So there are different reasons for doing it. There are different skills and different things that you need to think about with each of them. And today I'm going to go through a number of different topics. I'm going to be talking a bit about how they can be used. I'm going to talk about the structure because it's important, I think, that everyone understands the structure of what they're getting themselves into. I'm going to talk about due diligence. I'm going to go back through a bit about leasing and why that's important. And finally, I'm going to talk about intellectual property. So without any further ado, I'll talk about how mergers and acquisitions can be used to actually expand a business. So the advantage for using mergers and acquisitions to expand your business is that you're really getting a pre-existing business, and whether you're merging or you're acquiring another business, you're getting the advantage of someone who's operated a business successfully for usually a number of years or a number of months if it's a fast growth company, but usually it's a period of time and you've got an existing structure in place to be able to buy the business. Usually it's unique, and every business, and you would have heard me talk about this and Craig talk about this throughout the business legal life cycle, that every business has its own unique problems and issues, and also its own market. So if every business has got its own market, then you're going to have different businesses that have different markets. So, say if you're a real estate agency and you might operate in one suburb in one city in Brisbane, let's call it Caboolture, because that's where one of our offices is located. If you're operating that business in Caboolture, you may want to look at expanding that business into other suburbs around. And there might be existing businesses that have been operating there for a number of years that you could actually utilize to expand your business. So the classic one with a real estate agency is a rent roll. A rent roll is all of the properties that the agent has that are rented out and they manage, and they're actually a really valuable asset. So what a lot of real estate agents do is that they buy other rent roll businesses and use that to expand into the future. So rent rolls are really a way of expanding business, but the same can be said for just any other sort of business. If you've got a competitor, so that vertical line, then you could use that competitor's business to help expand your business by doing that. And equally, you could also use that business to expand into other markets, vertical in the supply chain. So there are many ways to be right with doing this. This is the area, I think, of all the stuff that we've talked about so far in the previous 34 shows of the Business Legal Lifecycle, you need to get advice if you're looking at doing this. There are many different ways to be right. There are many different ways that you might use to merge and acquire other businesses, but there are lots of moving parts. I'm going to go through some of those today just to show you the importance of that advice, as I said before. So the first thing to really have a think about is the structure. So if you've listened to any of our previous shows on show number 3, so way back right at the beginning, we did a show which was called Structures for Startups. And I'm not going to rehash that entire show because you can go back and watch that. And if you're interested in seeing the previous shows, you can go, if you're watching this on the Facebook page, you can see the pinned post at the top of the Business Legal Lifecycle Facebook page. And if you are listening to us on the podcast, please feel free to go and check that out. The pinned post has our index of shows. So it has indexes to the show notes, and copies of all of the videos from YouTube are on there. So show 003, Structures for Startups, goes through the different structures that exist. So you might have a company, you might have a trust, you might have a unit trust, you might have a family trust. You might have a partnership. There are a lot of different entities that you can use in business. And where the structure comes in really important with a business purchase is that structure that you're actually going to use to buy the business. Is that the existing business structure or is that another business structure? Now, the reason that that's important is if you're using your existing business and you're buying another business, when you do that, all of the risk that is in the current business and the previous business all go into one. They all go into one business and they're all together. So if one gets sued for whatever reason, then it's all liable together. So that can be a massive problem if your business is not set up, or if you're in a high risk business, I should say, rather than set up. So you need to have a think about what the actual structure is. Now, I've said before, and I'll say it again, that the best structure from a legal point of view is a separate legal structure for every single one of your assets. So a business is an asset, land is an asset, properties are an asset. The best protection that you can give yourself from an asset protection point of view is separate entities for each property or business asset that you own. So if you acquire another business, it is best to put that structure in that entity. Now, that may not be possible. I acknowledge that. So in show 7, Craig and I talked about financials and finance, and in particular, I'd invite you to go back and look at the finance side. If you're buying a business, it is very likely that you will be borrowing money to acquire that business. That's fine. That's the way that the economy works. Most people don't have a couple of $100,000 to $1 million to buy a business up front, so you need the bank to actually fund you. If that occurs though, you need to make sure that you can fund it and finance it. So a bank will often want the profits from one business to be used to pay for the profits of the new business. So that's a situation where you may not be able to set up separate legal entities. Now, there are ways around that. There are many ways to be right, as people say. So you need to get the right advice. You need to talk to your accountant. You need to talk to your mortgage brokers. You need to talk to your lawyers. Everyone needs to come together and give a holistic advice to make sure that the structure that you're using is right for you and your business, because the wrong structure can be a complete disaster. So make sure that you're getting that advice. Make sure that you're talking to the right people and making sure that they're talking together. I could go through 1,000 different examples of businesses that didn't get the right advice, that failed because they had well-meaning advice from their lawyer, their accountant, their financial planner, their mortgage broker, but they didn't get that advice aligned together. And because the advice wasn't aligned and going in the right direction, everyone was at cross purposes and no one actually got the right advice going forward. So make sure that you get advice on the structure and whether or not you need to borrow money and what that actually looks like. There can be other advantages to setting up separate structures as well. The accountants that are watching this or listening to this podcast will know that if you've got multiple trusts, they might be separate legal entities, but you can actually use them to shift profits from one side to the other. And what that can mean is that you can actually get a lot of good synergies with your tax accounting if you do that right. So making sure that you get that advice right up front and that you start up with an end in mind, as we always talk about, will be the way to make sure that you set up this up right for success in the future. So make sure that you get advice. If you want to know and get some advice on Structures 101, that's my Structures for Startup video where we go through that. Feel free to check that out. As I said before, just to reiterate the address, and we'll put this in the show notes, businesslegallifecycle.com/bll-tv.index. Or if you're minded to go and like our Facebook page, you'll see the pinned post at the top of the Facebook page is a link to that entity. So that video. I've got entities on my mind talking about structures. I love structures. I think that structures are great, but they're also something that's very much misunderstood out there and something that a lot of people need to get a little bit more clarity over, because at the end of the day, you're responsible for the business that you acquire. So you've got to make sure that you understand what you're going. So feel free to email me, watch those videos, email me with any questions, and I'll be happy to help out. So probably the thing I wanted to go into most of all in this section is due diligence. So if you've seen, we've talked about due diligence in a number of contexts before, but here we're talking about the due diligence that you use when you're buying a business. This is really important. Now I'm going to go through what due diligence looks like, and then I'm going to tell you a story. I have told this story before, but I'm just going to tell it again because I think it really encapsulates why due diligence and getting legal and accounting and financial planning and business coach advice is really crucial. So when you're buying a business, you'll have an opportunity to do your investigations into the business. Now, those are really important because you don't know what you don't know, and this is your opportunity to figure out what it is that you're buying. If you don't know what you're buying, then you're going to fail. You really are. It's really as crucial as that. So there's no legal definition of due diligence. Due diligence is one of those terms that clever lawyers have phrased up for many years, and we've come up with to basically determine all of the investigations that you do into your business to make sure that you're happy with the business before you buy it. Now, that is very broad, and it's deliberately very broad. And I'd encourage you to make sure that if you are looking at buying a business, that you talk to your lawyer to make sure that due diligence is correct. Also, talk to your lawyer before you sign the contract to make sure that the due diligence clause covers off everything that you need to do. Generally, they're quite broad clauses. They give a lot of scope for you as the buyer to go in and investigate all the different parts of the business. But they also can have what I like to call auto-deeming clauses. An auto-deeming clause is a clause that will say, and to be honest, I'm recording this on the 22nd of November. I saw one of these clauses yesterday in a contract. Basically, it says that if you don't get back to us by the due diligence date, then it's automatically deemed accepted. Now, the problem with that is that if you're trying to negotiate up until 5 o'clock on the day that the due diligence date is, that could really stifle the ability to actually settle. So for all the agents and all the lawyers out there, it's not clever to put a auto-deeming due diligence clause. It actually is counterproductive to what you're trying to achieve. So I always recommend, and I always make sure that what goes into our contracts is not an auto-deeming clause, that it's a due diligence clause that lets the buyer for, whether that be 7 days, 14 days, 30 days, 60 days, to investigate everything in the business and make sure that they're happy with it, because an auto-deeming clause will just cause more problems than they're worth. So, as I said before, a due diligence clause is designed to let you as the buyer examine the business and make sure that you're getting what you think you're getting. So there are a number of different ways that you can investigate it. So the first one are investigating leases. I'm going to talk about that in a bit more detail on the next part. Probably the most important is to look at the historical data about the financials. So I'm not an accountant, but you need to engage an accountant to look into those books and records and make sure what's in there is accurate. Now, the analysis is only good as the data in front of it. So if the seller is lying, then the buyer will not know about that. And there are actions that can be taken after the fact. But accountants going through the historical financials, both income and expenses, will be able to hopefully pick up on a lot of discrepancies, if there are any, or show that the business is actually profitable. Now, it's very important to see into the past. Very important. The past is very, very important. The future is even more important. So you need to have a look at the current business projections, what they look at selling, and what opportunities exist to upsell for the business. So when you buy a business, you're going to pay a price that's usually a multiple of the earnings, so of the last year. So you might look at what's the average price of the, I said that wrong, not price, the average EBITDA, so the earnings before interest, tax, depreciation, amortization of that business for, say, the last 3 years. So you take the average of those 3 years, and then you want to look at what it is in the future, where that goes in the future. So why that's important is to know, well, if you're paying a 2 or 3 multiple for that business, so EBITDA times 3 multiple, you need to make sure that you're going to be able to at least get the money back that you paid from your business, and more. You need to get more. You have to, because what's the point in buying a business to just pay back the debt that you got when you bought the business? You need to make sure to get that. So you need to look at the past. You need to look at the past, but you also need to look at the future and make sure that the past and future align so that you know where you're going with this business. Because the businesses that fail through this part of the business legal life cycle, the ones who don't look at those and don't get lots of input from their consultants to make sure that they know where they're going. So that's data. Looking at projections, a good accountant will bring those projections down and make sure that the business is still profitable, with a 25-50% cull on the business, because what you're buying is often so heavily reliant on the person that is actually previously in the business. They want to sell, but you got to bring them forward in the business to make sure that they're getting back. You need to look at your staff, their history and potential liabilities. So here you need to think about, well, who are the staff? Are they a good fit for you? Are the staff actually going to be the right people for your business? And can you work with them? So you need to have a look at all those things. The liability issue I'm talking about is work cover claims. So for anyone who runs a business who's watching this will know that you have work cover insurance or an equivalent in other states in Australia. Those insurances, you need to think about those and make sure that there are no claims that are pending on them. The next one is to review your agreements with your suppliers. So most businesses are going to have agreements with their suppliers, their distributors, other people in the business. They can be changed and they can be renegotiated for better terms. You need to have a look at those and see whether or not you can make any better profits out of any of those systems, because that's really crucial. You also need to search the government records. So we've talked about before licensing in businesses and the licenses that startup businesses need to have. When you take over a business, you need to make sure that you have the licenses in place. So if you're buying a pub, you need a liquor license. If it's got gaming machines, you need gaming machine licenses. You'll need a food license. If you're buying just a cafe, you need a food license. There are many different licenses that you need to make sure are in place. If there are improvements to the property, so if you're leasing a premises and there are improvements to the property, you want to make sure that all of those improvements have proper approval by their local council. Because otherwise, you may be happily operating your business, going along for 6 months, and then all of a sudden, the business, the council comes along and says, well, that extension isn't approved, therefore, we're not going to let you keep on trading, or you've got to spend money to fix it. They're all really important things that people miss that you need to do as part of your due diligence. So I'm going to go through in a bit more detail on leasing and intellectual property as well, because intellectual property is very important. When you're buying a business, and as we talked about in September, when we talked about intellectual property, you're buying my apologies, it was October 2017 was intellectual property. When you're buying a business, you're buying the intellectual property. That's what you're buying. You're buying client lists. You're buying all that information. So I want to talk about that in a little bit more detail. So what I've gone through, as you can see, there's quite a lot that I've gone through. Due diligence is one of those things that you need to sit down with your consultants, your lawyer, your accountant, and your other advisors, and get some clarity over what needs to be done. So what I would normally do, and what I recommend that you do, is when you're looking at buying a business and it's got a due diligence clause, or even if you're looking at this before you buy a business. So if you're looking at it over here before you buy the business, before you actually settle, you need to sit down and work out, well, what are the concerns? So you as the business buyer, what are your concerns about the business? Go through those. Then as a lawyer, I would normally go through, well, what are my concerns about the business? And then go through, well, what are some of the other issues that may arise in the business? So you want to go through all of these different aspects and work out, well, what are the concerns with the business and how can we address them? What searches can we do? What documents can we look at? What questions can we ask? Because the more questions you ask, the more information you're going to get. And if the seller lies to you, then you can sue them for misrepresentation. I can't stop, no lawyer, no one can stop someone from lying to you. We can see if we can find out about it, but you need to find out a little bit more information. Then you need to ask the questions and put them in writing and make sure that you have them right. The vast majority of cases when people buy a business are done perfectly legitimately, buyer and seller are on the same page and everything happens. But there are situations where that may go wrong. And this is where I wanted to give you an example. And this is an example of a cafe that had been operating for many years with different owners. So there were about 3 or 4 different owners. And this happened recently. So I'm recording this, as I said before, in November 2017. And this happened in the last 6 months. And I've been doing this kind of work for small and medium-sized businesses for around 15 years. And this is the worst that I've seen come up, where all of the problems came up together. So I'm not going to use any names, of course, but this client looked at buying a business and they found the business on a website that I will not say the name of, but you can buy and sell stuff between different people in the area. That website matches buyers and sellers together, and they go ahead and settle on businesses as well. This client paid $50,000 for a business. It was a cafe. They found it online. They thought, great, we're going to expand. We're going to start up this, we'll buy this business. We're going to turn it around. We're going to have this great little business. And they paid $50,000 for it. They signed a contract. They handed over their $50,000. They didn't get advice from anyone. And then they took over. Now, they then came and saw us and said, oh, we've got this contract. What are we doing? What do we need to do to formalize all the changes? Now, this was, a massive problem because The contract wasn't completed properly. It hadn't had duty paid on it, because all business transactions have duty payable on them. The business that they bought from didn't have a license to sell food. So in the area that they're located, and let's face it, in I think every local government area in Queensland and Australia, there is a requirement that you have a food business license or something equivalent. They didn't have the license. They didn't own the business name for the business. They didn't even own the equipment in the property, because all of the equipment was owned by the landlord, and they didn't know that because they hadn't looked at the lease, and the lease hadn't been assigned. Worst of all, they bought the business in their own name, and even more troubling was the fact that so they bought their own name without even thinking about the structures, and on top of all that, the premises weren't up to scratch for the food license. So, after many months of working through, we're almost at the stage where we fix this, but they've had to apply for a food business license. There was around $10,000 worth of work that had to be done to the premises to bring it up to code. They are negotiating with the landlord to make sure that they can get their lease. They've registered the business name. They have, they've basically sitting there scratching their heads thinking, why do we pay these people $50,000? So if they had come and seen us early on, they wouldn't have had all these expenses. They're also up for another lot of stamp duty, because they need to own the business in a separate entity, a trust structure for asset protection point of view, and also for getting the money through to their family for the best tax position. So they're up for double stamp duty. All in all, this little exercise has cost them about 20 grand extra. 20 grand extra in fees because they didn't get advice. Now, they weren't trying to do the wrong thing. I don't think the seller was trying to do the wrong thing either. But they didn't get advice, and you don't know what you don't know. So it's really important that if you are looking at a business, go and see a lawyer, get some advice, and make sure that you're protected, because no one else is going to protect you. No one else is going to protect you. Let's have a drink of water. So as I said before, probably one of the crucial parts is the lease. So in that story, you have the lease. They don't have a lease. They bought a business for 50 grand and they don't have a lease in place. So you need to have a look at the lease, and you need to make sure that your lawyer and other advisors are looking at the lease and giving you advice on that. So you need to see what the terms of the lease are. You need to see how they compare with your current lease. You need to make sure they work for the business. You need to work out what security is in place. Do they want a bond? Do they want a bank guarantee? Do they want personal guarantees from you? Personal guarantees make you personally liable for every single cent that's owed under that lease. You need to look at the length of the lease. How much is left in the current term? And then, is there an extension of the lease that you can get? If not, what are you buying? If you're paying, say, a 3 or 4 multiple for the business, and the lease runs out in 2 years and the landlord kicks you out, what have you paid for? You haven't paid for anything. You need to have a think about the rent and outgoings. How do they compare with what you had previously? And not only how do they compare, but how are you going to pay that rent? Can you afford, if it all goes badly in those premises, to continue paying the rent? What insurances do you need? So putting those kind of things in place and making sure that you have insurance, very, very important. What are the terms of default? What are the obligations of maintenance and repair? What happens at the end of the lease? This can be a really interesting question, because the way that some leases are worded may imply that when you buy the business, your obligation to repair is the same as what the original tenant had. So if you've got an obligation to put the premises back in the position that it was at the beginning of the lease, you need to know what that looks like. Was it a bare shell? Was it fitted out the way that it was? You need to consider what that actually looks like and make sure that you know. In show 5, leasing and insurance, we talked about what to do when you're leasing a premises. And one of those tips, and it's a crucial tip, is to actually go and do an inspection of the property and take photos. We've all got a phone. We've all got a phone, and they've all got cameras on them. Everyone's got a smart camera on there, a smartphone with a camera on it. Go and take photos. Use your iPad. Use your digital camera. Take photos and make sure that you know what it looks like, and to make sure that you know what your obligation is. And also think about car parking. That's something that people often miss. So make sure that you look at all these things in leasing as if you're leasing a brand new premises, because you are. You need to make sure that it works for you. The amount of times that I've had people come to me who've not read our advice or not taken the advice on the lease is quite sad, really, because it's caused them all manner of problems because they didn't consider it. So the last thing that I want to talk about today is on intellectual property. So intellectual property is really the value of what you're buying in your business. This is what you're buying. So what does that look like? You know, in the shows on intellectual property in October 2017, again, please check out the show index. We talked about what to do to put systems in place. The better the systems, the higher the multiple. That's fine. So you need to think about what systems are in place. So what are you actually buying? Is there a registered trademark? Does there need to be a registered trademark? What can you do if it can't be registered? You know, and if you need to change the name? Is there a patent for the business? These are all things that you need to think about when you're buying the business and that you won't ordinarily see in the advice that you're given by a lot of lawyers. But this is crucial. This is what you're buying. You're buying this asset. You need to be sure that you're getting what you pay for. So make sure that you get advice. Make sure that someone's looking at these things to make sure that your intellectual property is protected and that you get what you want and what you're paying for. That's really, really crucial. So thank you very much for watching this show, or if you're listening to the podcast, thank you very much for listening. This is our second last episode in November. We're going to do, third last episode. We've got Fast Fix Monday next week and our Wednesday show. Thank you for joining me. If you've got any questions, please feel free to email me at lifecycle@jeremystratton.com, or if you're watching this on Twitter, through Periscope, on YouTube, reach out to us, send us messages. We respond to everything that we get. We're there to help. We want to help because we want to stop businesses from failing. We want to prevent people from making the mistakes that we see out there. So this is part of our crusade to give advice to small and medium-sized businesses in an easy-to-understand way. So please ask us questions. We're happy to help out. If it needs to go further, then we'll let you know. And if you need to get advice from your lawyer, please ask them questions. In the meantime, have a great week, and I'll see you next time. Thanks very much.